Good morning and happy International Day of Happiness. Thank you for joining the RLS Foundation's webinar titled How to Increase Happiness and Well-Being. My name is Carla Diezenkowski and I'm the Executive Director of the Restless Legs Syndrome Foundation. The foundation is using Zoom Webinar for all webinar events. To ensure seamless webinar access, confirm that your Zoom app is up to date with the current software. If you need assistance accessing the live webinar on your computer, call the number listed on your registration confirmation email for assistance. If you have any additional questions, please email clara@rls.org. Before we begin, please be aware that all attendees will remain on mute during this hour. We thank you for the questions submitted with your registration. The presenter will answer as many questions as time allows following the presentation. After the webinar, the recording will be made available in the website's member portal section on the next business day. If you are not a foundation member and would like to view this and other recorded webinars, we invite you to become a member today by going to rls.org. As always, individuals suspecting that they may have RLS should consult a qualified healthcare provider. The information offered in the webinar is for informational purposes and should not be considered as a substitute for the advice of a healthcare provider. Today's speaker is Dr. Gary Brott. He is a speaker, author, and clinical psychologist. Dr. Brott earned his BA in psychology from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, otherwise known as my hometown.
There you go, baby.
Yeah, you got it. He earned his doctorate in clinical psychology from Hahnemann University Hospital in Philadelphia, and he has authored 3 books, including The Ring in the Rubble, Dig Through Change and Find Your Next Golden Opportunity. His passion is helping people adapt to change and enhance their happiness and well-being. Dr. Brott has a distinctive ability to engage audiences with his warmth, humor, and content, and get people to absorb his message and put it to use. His storytelling, examples, and exercises are authentic and bring his principles to life in a way few other communicators can. His messages are informed by science, shaped by experience, and delivered with heart. His speaking career began when Dr. Spencer Johnson asked him to be the leading speaker on Johnson's blockbuster best-selling book, Who Moved My Cheese? To date, Gary has given over 350 keynotes all over the globe for clients like Coca-Cola, IBM, eBay, FedEx, and NASA, to name a few. Dr. Brott also holds a special place in the RLS community. He is the son of RLS founding member Thelma Brott. Thank you, Dr. Brott, for your time and expertise, and I now ask you to begin your presentation.
Carla, thank you so much, and thank you to all of you out there who have joined us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world today, or whenever it is you might be viewing this webinar. I appreciate you joining us. So indeed, our topic is how to increase happiness and well-being while living with RLS. In addition to all that stuff Carla just read about me, I also have RLS. That is something that I experienced in my life. It was passed on to me by my mother. And let's see, the slides are frozen up here. There we go. My mother, Thelma Brott, as Carla just mentioned, was one of the founding members of the foundation, and loved her with all my heart and soul, and she taught me a whole lot. So we're going to hear a little bit more about her at the end, but I dedicate this presentation to you, Mom, in your honor and memory. I want to start off by asking you a question. And you can just kind of think about this for a moment. What is it that makes you happy? Just reflect on it just for a second. If you're like most people, you're going to be thinking of things like friends, family, pets, like this cute little dog that I have right here. Because it turns out that happiness is, well, I'm going to give you my definition of happiness because there's a lot of different ways to look at it. But the definition we're going to use of happiness today is it's a temporary state. So notice that right there. Happiness is not something that you feel all the time. Matter of fact, if you try to be happy all of the time, that's a perfect recipe for making sure you're not going to be happy most of the time, because happiness comes and goes like the clouds in the sky. But happiness is, so it's a temporary state, but it's marked by the absence of negative emotions, things like sadness, anger, disgust, fear, and those sorts of things. So when you're happy, you're not tending to focus on those or be experiencing those very much, but instead there's more positive emotions, happiness itself, joy, love, contentment, excitement over something positive that's going on. So our goal today is to figure out how can we all get just a little bit happier, even when we are living through circumstances of our life that might not be ideal, including, I think most of us probably would not choose RLS in our lives, but we have it. So how can we, living with RLS, still find happiness in our lives? How to increase happiness and well-being. So let me define well-being for today. Whereas happiness is this temporary state that kind of comes and goes, and our goal is to build more of it into our day-to-day life. Well-being is a longer-term perspective. Well-being is more, it's a sense, an overall sense of satisfaction with your life. That, hey, yeah, I got ups and downs in my life. Everything's not going great, but overall, hey, overall, my life is going okay. And for me, well-being is marked by a couple of things. Having some sort of sense of purpose, some reason why I get out of bed in the morning, and having adequate social connections and healthy relationships. And those are two different things. Your social connections are literally an objective measure of how much contact you have with other human beings. And then relationships are people that you choose to get closer to. So we're going to be talking today about how to increase happiness and well-being. Well-being tends to flow from being happier. So most of the tools and techniques that I'm going to give you today will be things that you can immediately apply in your life to increase the happiness in your life, which will support your well-being. Happiness is a universal language from what, as I look at it, and here's one of the reasons why. It looks the same the world over. Wherever you are in the world, everybody looks the same when they're happy. They're laughing, they're smiling. And one of the things that I like is that they're sharing their happiness with others. You know how somebody says something really funny, or if you're at a play or a comedy show and there's a really, really funny joke, what do we tend to do? We tend to turn and we look at the people next to us because we automatically want to share it. So happiness is something that brings us together. We all speak the language of happiness. It's actually psychologists like myself, we do all kinds of studies. And one of the studies that we do is we go out and we will measure people, we'll show people facial expressions. And we say, hey, without knowing what this person is feeling, what do you think they're feeling? So we'll show them happy faces, unhappy faces, anger, fear. Happiness is always the one that's recognized most accurately. It's been studied. Happiness has been something that's been studied and written about since antiquity. All of the Greek philosophers wrote deeply and thought deeply about what is happiness. And it's a goal pursued the world over. Everybody across the globe, if you're human, most people say, do you want to be happier? Sure, I'd love to have more happiness in my life. As a matter of fact, today is the International Day of Happiness. Every March 20th, since 2012, the UN, in conjunction with other organizations, has focused on happiness. Matter of fact, one thing you might want to do today, after we get done, is Google the World Happiness Report. Because every year on this date, March 20th, the UN and Gallup and others put out a report on the state of happiness across the globe. Some very interesting information in there. I encourage you to check it out. So happiness is something that everybody is interested in. And today we're going to find out how can we use it to increase our life satisfaction, to increase our well-being, and to give us perhaps some tools we didn't have before to deal with the challenges of RLS. So here's a natural question. Happiness, I'll grant you, it sounds a little, oh, I want to be happier. Woo. Well, what difference does it really make? I mean, what's the difference if you feel a little bit happier, Gary? Why should we care about happiness? Well, to begin to answer that question, I want to share with you a study they did about nuns, interestingly enough. Turns out, back in the 1930s, there was about 700 young women about age 22 that were about to go become professional nuns. They were about to enter a convent and make this their life's work. One of these 22-year-old women who were about to enter into this profession of being a nun, they were asked to write a short autobiographical sketch about their life. And just, tell us about your life and why you think you might want to do this for a living and so on. And these young women, they wrote it down, and then the stuff got stuffed in a drawer somewhere. And like 60 years later, somebody was going through some kind of records or files, and suddenly they find these autobiographical sketches that these young 22-year-old women had written down like 60 years previous. And they said, oh, this is pretty interesting. I wonder whatever happened to these young women. I wonder how the rest of their life went, because now they would have been in their 80s or 90s if they had lived that long. So they decided to do a study. And what they did is they took those autobiographies that the young women had written about themselves, and they came up with a way to measure happy words that they used, unhappy words that they used, and neutral words. And this was a well-done study. It was well-controlled, and the evaluators were trained, and they had like 3 or 4 different people read each autobiography and then rate it for how many happy words, how many unhappy words, and so on. And at the end of it, they were able to categorize the nuns as, hey, these seem to be the happier young women. These young women weren't so happy, and others were maybe more neutral. And then they said, okay, so what happened to them? And they looked at all kinds of variables. But for our purposes today, check this one out. The happiest nuns, on average, lived 7 years longer, controlling for everything else. So we're not talking about the fact that, they were in better health going in. No, everything was equal. The only thing that was different was some of them we would call happier, and it seemed to increase their longevity at a very significant level. That was one of the first clues. I think this study was back like in the 1990s. And since then, there's been all kinds of research on happiness and well-being. I'm going to share some of that with you today, and we'll turn it into practical experiences. Matter of fact, there's been a lot of research on just, what's the impact of happiness on health altogether? And by the way, the research is always changing. It's always growing. So when I say research shows, I'm really saying research suggests. But there's a lot of research that would suggest when it comes to happiness and health, that it helps to lower our stress. It helps all these other sorts of things. I'm not going to read all this to you, but you can read it yourself. You can see that people who are happier, there's a lot of positive things that come out of that. So you can imagine if you have a stronger immune system, better heart health, that, yeah, you'll probably live longer than folks who don't have as strong immune systems. Now, when we think about RLS, particularly, I focus on these 2 things: lower stress and reduce pain sensation. So if you're feeling happier, you have a happier life, lower stress. We know from the research, and many of us know from our personal lives, that stress can be a trigger for the RLS symptoms. So it just goes to, it makes sense that if we can lower our stress level, it's going to help us perhaps trigger our RLS symptoms a little less. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? And also for some of us, RLS can be painful. It can be really not just the movement, but we can experience an awful lot of pain. Now, being happier is not going to change the pain itself, but notice what the research suggests. It has reduced pain sensation. So the pain is still there, basically, but the research would suggest that happier people just aren't bothered by it as much. Same thing for people who are like in their latter years, in their 80s and their 90s. People who are happier, they have the same aches and pains and problems that everybody does at that age, but it just bothers them less than it does people who tend to be less happy. So happiness, while it can sound like just sort of like, yeah, it sounds like a little fluffy, if you will, it actually has some nice hard results that are relevant for our lives. So my aim with us today is to give you practical science-backed practices that you can immediately apply to increase your happiness and your sense of well-being. I'm going to give you what I call a 7-step happiness workout plan, 7 different things you can begin trying today that will help increase your happiness if you practice them over time. Because folks, I'm going to put it this way. In many ways, finding happiness is a choice. Now, this doesn't mean life isn't challenging. It doesn't mean RLS isn't very difficult to live with. It doesn't mean all the other things that happen in our lives. There's a lot of difficult pain and suffering out there that we all have to experience as part of being human. But even within those most difficult times of our lives, there are brief moments, there's glimmers of joy and happiness that we can find. My family, sense of humor is one of the things that I appreciate about my family. And My father one time had this medical emergency. We were at his doctor's and suddenly he was like passing out and they're calling the ambulance and they rush him off to the hospital and mom and I are sitting there and we don't even know if dad has made it. Has he died? What's gone on? So we get in the car, we drive down to the hospital and we get there and he's in the emergency room. Thank God he's still alive. And then the doc, right when I walked in, the doctors, they were coming to roll him away because they wanted to do a CAT scan of his brain. They thought maybe he had had a stroke or they didn't know what it was. And so I go down there and my dad's kind of hard of hearing. So I said, hey, Dad, they're going to take you for a CAT scan of your brain. He goes, what's that? And they're rolling him out. So they're going to take you for a CAT scan of your brain, Dad. And then my dad, we don't know if he's going to live or die, but he says, all right, but if they don't find one, I want to see the wizard. That was not a happy day for us. That was not a good day for us. Dad lived, that was good. He ended up getting a pacemaker and all the other stuff that we all have to go through at some point. But he maintained his sense of humor. It was a moment of happiness for us in an otherwise not so happy day. So I don't want to, when I say happiness is a choice, it doesn't mean, oh, it doesn't matter what's going on in your life. You can be happy. No, there's many days that are going to be challenging and difficult. But if you so choose, and sometimes, folks, it's as easy as this. This morning, I was out on my morning walk, which is one of my favorite things to do every morning. And I started listening to the news and I go, why am I listening to this? This isn't going to make me happy. And so I cut it off and I turned on to the book that I was listening to. Sometimes it's as easy as that. It's just as easy, like, hey, if there's something you're doing that you know is not contributing to your happiness, stop. You know, the old vaudeville joke is like, hey, doc, it hurts when I go like this. And the doc says, don't go like that. Sometimes it's that easy. So let's keep on going. First, though, before we get into how to increase happiness, I want to dispel some myths. Because one of the problems of trying to get happier and when we struggle with it is because we're focusing on the wrong things. We're focusing on things we think will make us happy, but in the end, they really don't. And this is just coming now. This isn't from the research or the science. This is from my life experience as a human being, living my own life, messing it up, being a psychologist to a degree, but this is really more just from living life and working with other people. I've discovered there's 3 myths that it's easy for us to fall into, the things that we think will make us happy, but they don't. The first great myth of happiness, I call it, I will be happy when, fill in the blank. I'll be happy in when I finally can move into that big new house that we've been so looking forward to all of our lives. I'll be happy when I get that new car. I'll be happy when I go on that fantastic vacation. I'll be happy when I get that raise. And you know what? When we are fortunate enough to experience those things in our life, they will boost our happiness. But guess what? It doesn't last. It kind of goes away. And here's one of the reasons why. Let's take a look at my little chart here, my little graph. Down there in the bottom left-hand on my screen, that's our baseline happiness. And there's a theory that we're all born with a baseline level of happiness. And we all know some people who are just seem to be naturally cheerier than other people. Their house is burning down. They go, hey, we could do marshmallows. I mean, nothing seems to bother them. They're always kind of happy. And then there's other people that no matter how well their life is going, and you ask them, hey, how's it going? They're always going to grumble about something. So I do believe there's probably some inborn genetic level of happiness. We'll call it our baseline. Now, no matter where you are in your baseline, you can always move up. And as a matter of fact, when those happy events, whatever will make you happy, it will give you a boost to your happiness. But guess what? It doesn't last. It goes back down. That new car that you get that you're so excited about, have you ever noticed that, for the first couple of months, oh yeah, this is great, but after a while, it's just a car. And that big, beautiful new house that you just got, man, this is so great, but now the mortgage has gone up and it's a little bit harder and things start breaking and all that sort of stuff. So the happy events give us a boost, but it doesn't last. The technical term for this is called hedonic adaptation. And it's the way our brains adapt to events that we'll get these little boosts, but we tend to go back towards our baseline. The good news is it works in reverse as well, so that when we have very unhappy events in our lives, for example, my sister this morning just lost one of her precious, precious pets that she's had, and I loved her too, Lucy, her dog. That's a very sad event. You're going to have a dip in your happiness. The good news is, though, over time, you'll return to your baseline. So I'll be happy when doesn't work so well. So here's a myth-busting tip. Don't wait to be happy. Choose to find happiness now in this moment. On my screen there, Indochine is a restaurant near where I live here in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I love, they get this. So like I was driving by one day, I took a picture of this. Today is the day. Because if you stop and think about it, folks, you say, I'll be happy when? Tomorrow? You can't be happy tomorrow because that's the future. You can't be happy then. It's not here yet. And when it gets here, it's going to be today. And you certainly can't be happy yesterday. Yesterday's come and gone. The only time you can really choose to be happy is to be happy in this moment. And again, this isn't to minimize, there's many, many difficult moments in life, but no matter how difficult it is, we can make the choice to find more happiness if we so choose. So that's myth number one. Myth number two, very, very common, is money's going to make me happy. I call that the second great myth of happiness. And I was fortunate enough to learn this early on. I was a consultant. I was working with business people and leadership and stuff like that. And a couple of my clients owned a beer distributorship. They're in their early 40s. They were fabulously wealthy. They both had huge mansions that they were living in. And I go, man, these guys got it made. And then they were talking with one another one time when I was there. And this is what they were saying to each other. They said, why were we so much happier when we were like 19 years old? Because at 19 years old, they had started working at that beer distributorship in the warehouse, sweeping the floors and taking care of the warehouse. And they're sitting there, and I'm amazed listening to them. They go, and we were a lot happier back then. We didn't have anything. We're both broke. But, we each, were in love with our women, and we got married, and you and I would go crabbing on the weekends, and women would get together and make coleslaw and hush puppies, and we'd come together and have a crab and beer fest. And look at us now. I mean, we never get together. My wife she's in our mansion trying to manage all this. We can't get the gardeners to do whatever. And you're constantly running down the beach because you can't get somebody to manage your property. So they had all this money, but the money wasn't making them happier. They were much happier when they did. Now, that doesn't mean money's a bad thing. As a matter of fact, here's the thing about money and happiness. If you don't have enough of it to pay your bills, to go to the doctor, to keep a roof over your head, you're going to be really unhappy. And if you get enough money to do those sorts of things, it will increase your happiness. But at some point, at some level, it kind of balances out. And most research suggests that when you get to a certain level, when you can pretty much take care of your fundamental needs, getting more money will give you that temporary boost in happiness, but it's not likely to last. So my myth busting tip on that one is money will buy you comfort. There's no doubt about it. You have enough money, boy, it's nice. It'd be pretty nice to have a really fancy boat, wouldn't it? Pretty nice to be able to stay in fancy hotels. Yeah, that's very comfortable, but it's not going to make you happier over the long run. And the third myth to happiness is that accumulating more stuff. Well, if I just get more stuff, then I'll be happy. Kind of goes along with the other one. If I get a new car, I get a new sofa, or get something new that's going to make me happy. But here's the problem with stuff. It all ends up looking like this. Over time, stuff kind of wears out. So again, you'll get that little boost, but the stuff itself doesn't last. The happiness from stuff doesn't last. Doesn't mean you shouldn't get stuff. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try to accumulate money if you want more money. Just don't expect these things to provide you lasting happiness. You'll get temporary boosts, which is fine. But the myth-busting tip for this one is experiences last much longer than stuff. Matter of fact, there's interesting research. Now, we know with RLS that one of the theories behind it is that we don't have enough dopamine flowing through our brains. And that can be an issue. Well, dopamine is one of the things that bring you pleasure and joy. It's the chemical that brings you pleasure and joy in your life. Research has shown that when people are anticipating an experience, so like my wife and I, we just booked a cruise, fortunate enough to book a cruise 3 months from now. Well, anticipate, every time I think about that, I get this little shot of dopamine. I get a little shot of happiness. I get a little shot of pleasure. So matter of fact, research sometimes will suggest that anticipating an event gives you more pleasure than the actual event itself. And so, but you get to anticipate the event, dopamine. You get to have the event, pleasurable. And afterwards, you have these memories that last forever. So experiences. Now, it doesn't have to be some big fancy thing like going on a cruise. It can be, I look forward to my Saturday dates with my wife, and I anticipate those. And you know what they are? I drive her to the gym, and she gets a workout, and I maybe walk around the track. And then we'll go, maybe she wants to shop a little bit. Maybe we'll stop and get a little bit of lunch. Experiences can be looking up at the sky, at the stars. It doesn't have to be some big fancy thing. But life experience has taught me that those experiences will give you longer lasting happiness than accumulating more and more stuff. So those are our three myths. Let's just review them really briefly here. I'll be happy when, money's going to make me happy, more stuff's going to make me happy. I encourage you to maybe think about it a little bit differently, that, hey, if I want to be happy, let me choose to try to find it in this moment because that's all I have. And I'm not going to expect money is going to make me happy over the long run. It's going to buy me comfort and it's going to pay my bills, which is very, very important. But getting more and more money. You read those stories about the people who win the lottery? I remember there's one a couple of years ago where a group of people, you see this, a group of people working in a factory, they put their money in and they all won the lottery. And I remember watching a press conference. There's this one guy, I love him. He had this Grateful Dead t-shirt and long hair. And he was just like, excited, they won the lottery. And then a month later, I saw another interview with that guy. He was one of the most unhappy people I've ever seen in my life. And he was talking about, oh my gosh, I never realized that, this would create me so many problems. And everybody's coming to me with money and I can't help everybody. And it's like, money will buy you comfort, not happiness, and experiences, folks. From taking the dog for a walk, to looking at the midnight sky, to going out to dinner with a loved one, whatever it is, those are the things that can help create more lasting happiness. Okay, now we got those myths out of the way. I'm going to give you what I'm going to call our 7-step happiness workout plan. That's because trying to get happier is just like trying to get stronger or more fit. If you want to live a healthier life, there's lots of different ways you can do it. Some people like to go to the gym and lift weights. Some people like me, I like to take nice long walks. Other people like to run. Some people do yoga. Some people do stretching. Some people do Zumba, whatever it might be. There's a lot, but we're all trying to get healthier. There's lots of different ways to do it. Now, if you're trying to get healthier and you go on a walk one time and you never go on another one, or you lift weights one time and you never lift another weight, or you only go to one Zumba class and you never go to another one, it ain't going to make too much difference in helping you get healthier. It's something that you need to do on a consistent basis over time. Turns out getting happier is very similar, that there's a whole range of things that you can do. What might make me happier might not work for you. I'm going to give you 7 different things. If you go out, and I'm going to give you a few resources at the end, other books and things you can look at, and you can Google all this stuff. There's 1,000,001 things we can do to get happier. I'm going to give you 7 that are fairly common, that research shows tend to be helpful for people. Hey, but maybe one's going to work better for you than the other. You experiment, you find it, and then you do it over time. It's not going to have an immediate effect, but if you practice these things over time, the research would strongly suggest it will help you increase your happiness and therefore your well-being over time. So before we go into those 7, in general, the principle behind these are what we're trying to do is train our brain for positivity to offset what we call the negativity bias. Gary, what in the world is the brain's negativity bias? Well, stop and think about it. What's your brain's purpose? Your brain's purpose is to keep you alive. And there's lots of different ways it does it. But one of the ways the brain keeps you alive, and this was when the earliest part of the brain evolved, as mankind was evolving, this part of the brain evolved before anything else. It's noticing the danger around you. Because let's say the early man was out there hunting for his dinner. And if he didn't notice that the saber-toothed tiger was hiding in the bushes, he would become dinner for the saber-toothed tiger. So our brains learn to scan the environment, even when we're not consciously doing it, looking for things that might harm us. And we share that part of our brain with, the other day, there's this little bug in the bathtub, and I went to get it, and he sensed me coming to get it, and suddenly he's starting running around. He's got the same thing in his brain that I got in my brain. Brains are on the lookout for danger. It's good. It keeps us alive. The problem is, we got so many things going, so many stressors in our life today, our brain will respond to a traffic jam the same way our brain used to respond to the saber-toothed tiger. And it'll respond to a canceled flight. It'll respond to the stressors at work. It'll respond to this kid's schedule that's overwhelming. It'll respond to RLS that tells us, oh my gosh, I can't handle this. And the brain will go in overdrive, and it releases all these stress hormones, and our body never really has a chance to recover. The stress hormones were designed to help us in the moment deal with the stressor, but then to calm back down. So it's a normal part of our brain. In today's modern world, it's easy for that part of our brain to be overactive. We don't want it to go away. It keeps us alive. But what we need to do is kind of counterbalance it and train our brain for more positivity. So many of these things, many of these practices that will help us be happier will help us find more positivity in our life and train our brain to notice. So for example, First one, you can do this right here, right now. It's called savoring. Savoring is finding a little moment of pleasure, and you can use it with all five senses: taste, touch, sight, smell, and sound. And there's potential happiness and things to savor all around. Like right now, I'm sitting, I'm looking out, there's a beautiful blue sky. I could just sit here when I was working on this presentation yesterday. I looked out on my bird feeder and there's this beautiful red cardinal. Mom used to love cardinals. I just took 10 seconds to enjoy that cardinal. Right now, there's a bird flying up on it. I make my wife coffee in the morning. I don't like coffee, but I love the smell of the ground. So whenever I make her the coffee, I just take a moment. Now that's a little micro dose of happiness, of joy, of pleasure. And if you can notice those micro doses, maybe you're out walking and there's a kid playing with a dog in the park, and just take a moment to notice the kid playing with the dog in the park. It gives you a little shot of dopamine, a little shot of happiness, a little micro doses. And the more we start paying attention, looking around and taking those little shots, they add up over the course of the day. Matter of fact, a woman by the name of Barbara Fredrickson, a researcher in this area, she came up with a ratio that's kind of like 3 to 1. If you can have like 3 positive experiences during your day versus every negative one, that's going to kind of help you go on a path of increasing happiness. I'm not sure that ratio always holds, that sort of thing, but it's an interesting concept. It's an interesting thought. And savoring is something right now while you're sitting there. What's something that you could savor? Look around. Maybe there's a beautiful plant next to you. Maybe you got your cat sitting in your lap, or your dog is over there creating havoc, or whatever it is. Take a moment to savor it and enjoy it. Those moments are there waiting for us all of the time. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2 in our happiness workout plan is a little bit more involved. It's called 3 Good Things. This was developed by a man by the name of Marty Seligman, one of the first psychologists to really get into what's now called positive psychology. And Marty and his colleagues came up with this little exercise called 3 Good Things. Been researched an awful lot, and it's been shown to have tremendous positive impact. All right, Gary, what's 3 good things? It's real simple, folks. What you do once a day, usually most people do it at the end of the day, you get out a piece of paper and you write down 3 good things that have happened to you over the course of the day or over the course of the last 24 hours. And you can do it on your computer if you want. The research kind of suggests when you actually write things down, it even enhances the effect, but do it however works for you. All this stuff is do whatever works for you. But basically, what are 3 good things that happened to me today? So when I got up I got up and I took my nice long walk, and it was really enjoyable and it was beautiful. When I came home, I got to see my wife, whom I love so much. And now I'm here spending time with you. Boom, there's 3 good things right there for me. You write them down, and then what happened and how did it make you feel? That's it. No big thing. You don't have to, a sentence or 2. It can take you 3 minutes maybe to do the exercise. Here's the thing. That's it. That's all you got to do. Here's what the research suggests. If you do that for just 1 week, do 3 good things once a day, every day for 1 week, you will experience less anxiety, less depression, a greater sense of well-being. And here's my favorite part about 3 good things. Impact lasts for months. And think about that. Impact lasts for months. And we know anxiety can be a trigger. Stress and anxiety can be a trigger and a cause and maybe a symptom of RLS. But if we can do anything to lessen our anxiety, some of us, like myself, suffer from depression from time to time. That also can go along with RLS. So anything that we can do to lessen those sorts of things is fantastic. 3 good things is a simple little exercise, a lot of strong research behind it. I encourage you, a lot of people try that one and really, really like it. Matter of fact, that's one reason why we think it might last for months. Some people like it because they keep on doing it. And that's why it lasts so long, and they like it so much. What we're doing is we're training our brain. No matter how bad my day has been, I had a guy that pulled out in front of my car last year and boom, we T-boned. Luckily, nobody got hurt. My car's all smashed up, his fault, and all this other kind of stuff. And then my bumper's hanging off my car, and I'm like, man, this isn't any good. Well, it turned out the guy was an airline mechanic. He felt so bad about causing the accident. He had all these zip ties. The next thing you know, it's like, he fixed my car all up. I don't even know if I need to take it to the gym. I mean, to the car mechanic. So there's always, no matter how bad your day is going, there are some good things going on there as well. The 3rd step of our workout plan is experiencing awe. Awe is something that is just now being covered by the researchers. It's the emotion. Fundamentally, awe is anything that makes you go, whoa, wow, look at that. A little bit more technical definition comes from the man who's doing a lot of this research, Dacher Keltner at UC Berkeley. Dacher does a lot of wonderful work on happiness, and he did a great book on awe. And Dacher describes awe as the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends our understanding of the world. And, this is a picture I found from the James Webb Space Telescope, looking into deep space. And you look at that and you go, whoa. But you don't always have to, go with something big and grand. When I'm out on my walk, I come across, this is a picture I snapped of this, thing. This thing is probably about 2 inches across. This ant is like, I look at that and I go, my gosh, ants do that? I couldn't do that. That is a way that I experience awe. Awe is something, again, that's there for us any moment we choose to pay attention. A lot of this is paying attention. The benefits of awe from the research Dacher and others have done is it deepens our breathing, slows our heart rate. Interestingly, awe increases our trust and bonding. And there's a chemical that gets released in our brain, a neurotransmitter called oxytocin. Oxytocin is this chemical that increases our sense of trust and bonding with other people. And when we're experiencing awe with others, it tends to bring us closer together with others. And interestingly, it quiets that inner critic, that little voice that's telling us we're not doing it right. Lots of different ways to experience awe, folks, that are right there for the taking no matter what. Enjoying nature if you're able to get outside, witnessing good acts of other people who are there to take care of others, reading your favorite books, literature, poetry, experiencing, ballet, athletics, people doing stuff that make you go, wow, look at that. Lots of ways to experience awe. So question for yourself, and this third step of our happiness workout plan is what inspires awe in you? And a lot of times you just have to pay attention. That picture I had at the very beginning with the beautiful sunrise and all that kind of stuff, I'll be out on my walk, I'm not paying any attention, and I'll look up and, whoa, look at that. I hadn't even noticed. Another good thing to put into our happiness workout plan. Now, here's something that is really, really powerful. It's more in depth. It takes some time to get into it, but man, the research behind this is really, really cool. Mindfulness meditation. Now, we got the woman there in the traditional stance and all that kind of stuff. Some people go, well, I don't want to sit on a cushion. I don't want to sit there like cross-legged. I can't sit cross-legged. You can do meditation anywhere, lying down, taking a walk. Mindfulness meditation is simply moment by moment, non-judgmental awareness. And this is the kind of thing I can't cover it in our talk, but I can tell you that if you look into mindfulness meditation, it can be a tremendous tool to help you get better control of your mind. There's research out there that suggests that about 47% of the time, our minds tend to wander. And when they tend to wander, it's called the default mode network of the brain. When they tend to wander to autobiographical stories we tell about ourselves, particularly the problems that we have in our life. So it's really easy to sit there and go, oh, listen to this guy battling on. He doesn't know. My legs are driving me nuts. My life is going, and my kids are driving me nuts. Mindfulness allows you to notice all of that's going on in your mind, but not get swept up by it. I just want to check my time, and I'll make sure I leave some time for questions. So mindfulness meditation is just fantastic. Now, there's all kinds of benefits to meditation. A lot of research on this. And these are some of the benefits that you can have. Notice again, less stress. Anything that can do to reduce our stress for RLS, people living with RLS, that's a good thing. And it does all these other sorts of things for us too. And let me highlight the ones that I think are most relevant for our RLS. Less stress, we've talked about that. Increased resiliency. People who meditate over time, by the way, it doesn't take a lot of time either. Particularly during the pandemic, they did some new research. We've been doing more and more research. The research is going on all the time. People think you got to sit there on a mat for like an hour. No. You can meditate for 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, 2 minutes a day. Anything that you do over time will have a positive impact on your brain, a positive impact on your sense of happiness and well-being. So it doesn't mean you got to do this big, huge thing. Just start off small, a couple minutes a day. Less stress, increased resiliency. We're going to define that as resiliency is how quickly do you bounce back from adversity. Sometimes we have really bad nights with RLS, don't we? It's a really, really bad night. People who are more resilient get over that quicker than people who are less resilient. Meditation can help us be more resilient. And going back to pain management. Meditation is being used a lot now as a tool for pain management, where people are through meditation, noticing the sensation of pain, but not doing all the mental add-ons of, I hate this is awful, I'm in so much pain. It's more like focusing on, what am I experiencing right now? I'm feeling a lot of pressure in my leg. I'm feeling my legs move and I don't want them to move, but not getting swept away with all the negativity. Matter of fact, I want to highlight a guy here, Jon Kabat-Zinn, was one of the first people to take a look at meditation and mindfulness and how it might help us overcome physical issues. And he came up with a program called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, MBSR. And in preparation for our talk, I went and did a little research, and I discovered there's even a small little study. It's just a suggestive study. It's not in depth, but they did a study on MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, and its impact on RLS. And that study suggested that the people who do MBSR tend to get a reduction in their symptoms of RLS while they're going through this program and maintaining it over time. So you might want to do a little bit of research, look up Jon Kabat-Zinn, mindfulness-based stress reduction. There's a lot of different programs that are offered around it. Basically, it's like an 8-week program when they teach you yoga and meditation. And of course, that's just one. There's all kinds of ways to meditate. I'm just trying to give you a taste and a flavor. And I would say whatever you do in your happiness workout plan, some form of meditation, I'm suggesting, could be beneficial. Our fourth thing that we can do to boost our happiness is to practice gratitude. Cicero, the famous Roman orator and philosopher and statesman, said that gratitude is the parent. It's the greatest and the parent of all other virtues. Again, Indochine, I was driving by one time and there's their beautiful sign, cultivating gratefulness. And gratefulness is simply being happy for what you have in your life, not because of something that you have done, but usually it's because of what someone else has done for you. And there's so much for us to be grateful in life, even when life is difficult, even when things aren't going well. There's so much for us to still step back and say, well, I may have a horrible, medical diagnosis, but I'm grateful for the doctors who are there to help us. Aren't we thankful for the RLS Foundation and for maybe not my webinar, but other webinars and educational things that you get to go to? And then we have Carla and her colleagues, grateful for that. So we're afflicted with this thing, but we got people out there who are researching it and trying to help us. Can't we be grateful for that? The research on gratitude is extensive. There's many, many benefits. I'm just going to hit up a couple of them: more joy, pleasure, stronger immune systems, and less lonely and isolated. When you're grateful, you're less lonely, and loneliness is a bit of a pandemic going on right now globally, and loneliness is not good. There's some research that would suggest people who are lonely, which means you don't have as much close contact with people as you want, it has negative impact on us, not just emotionally, but also physically. There's some research that suggests people who are chronically lonely, it's like smoking 17 cigarettes a day. If gratitude can help us get over that, fantastic. All right, Gary, how can I express more gratitude in my life? Lots of different ways. One technique is called a gratitude letter, where you simply write a letter, a one-page letter. Again, handwritten is typically better than all of mine. They probably couldn't read it, so I might have to type it out, but you write a one-page letter to somebody who's really made a difference in your life. And you just write them a letter and let them know, here's the difference that you made. You don't even have to send it. They might not even be alive anymore. But if they are, and they're willing, you can read it to them. That increases the impact of the exercise. Gratitude journal, some of you may be familiar with that. Maybe you do that. It's like once a week. The researcher would suggest about once a week is the right thing. And you just sit down and you think about, it's kind of like 3 good things, but you think a little bit deeper about 1 or 2 things in your life that you're really deeply grateful for. In general, people more than things, but you can certainly write about you're grateful for your home or whatever it might be. That's another technique that you can use. A real simple one you can start doing right away is when you're going through the grocery store line, or a clerk is helping you out, or a waiter, or whatever it might be. My wife, making me my favorite meal, whatever it is, you make eye contact and you say, thank you. All these are ways that will increase the gratefulness in your life and the gratitude in your life, which research strongly suggests will impact your happiness and your well-being. Following that, the next tool that I want to give you, the next workout that you can do, is to practice. Notice, practice gratitude, practice compassion, not just have the thought, but actually do it. Compassion is feeling the distress of another human being and the desire to help. The Dalai Lama says, if you want to be happier, practice compassion. If you want other people to be happier, practice compassion. Because it turns out that when we are showing compassion to others, it increases our happiness. because it reduces our self-focus. If we got a lot of bad stuff going on in our life, I go out and help somebody else who's got stuff going on in their life. I'm not thinking as much about the pain and suffering in my life because I'm putting this energy into helping them. And ironically, while I'm trying to help them have a better life, I'm also helping me have a better life. It also provides us a sense of purpose. A lot of research on the importance of having a sense of purpose, particularly as we get older. Maybe we're no longer working. Maybe the kids are grown or whatever it might be. Just finding some reason. It doesn't have to be this big life-changing thing, but just some reason why I'm going to get out of bed. That's very important. And again, compassion helps us decrease loneliness. Check my time. We're doing pretty good. I'll take questions here shortly. Another way that you can show compassion is through volunteering. Volunteering, again, folks, look at that. Lowers stress, lowers depression. We know those are correlates, not necessarily causal. We don't know which causes one. Do we have stress and, anxiety and depression and stress, and that triggers the RLS, or does the RLS cause us to feel as that way? But anything we can do to lower the stress and depression is good. Interesting, volunteering, there's some research that would suggest it lowers our risk of cognitive impairment, may increase longevity. Think about that. Showing compassion to others. Matter of fact, in the World Happiness Report that just came out today, they showed that people who have a greater sense of well-being in their life over the course of their life are at less risk for developing dementia. Stop and think about that. The power of happiness and increasing our happiness and our sense of well-being can have these strong physical. The research is strongly suggesting that anyhow. So practicing compassion. And the last one that I want to share with you, I'm going to start off with a question. What is the number one secret to a long and happy life? There's been a study going on at Harvard. It's still going on. It started in the late 1930s. I'll spare you the details, but they followed people from the time they were like in Harvard College and then living in Boston. They followed them for their whole life and sent them all these surveys and stuff. And they've got 85 years worth of data and counting. And they look at everything you could possibly imagine about how people's lives turned out over time. And what was the number one thing out of all that research that increased happiness over the course of a lifetime and well-being? It was relationships. Relationships. It's not the number of relationships, but it's having at least one person, that one person that you could call in the middle of the night if you got a really bad problem. It's also relationships at a social level, just having social connections, being out and about and waving at people and saying hello and having small little conversations while you're waiting to check out at the store, whatever it is. Relationships are the number one secret to a long and happy life. So there's research out there that suggests that as we get older, people who have high quality relationships have healthier brains, healthier bodies, happier moods. Relationships, folks. I know one question that came in ahead of time that I saw, somebody says, Gary, is it important that you have, happy family relationships in order to be happy? And hey, some of us are blessed with happy family relationships. Some of us aren't. Our worst relationships might be in our family. So I would say, no, it's not important that it has to be in your family. Ideally, that'd be great. But to have some people in your life that you can turn to and they can turn to you and you have that closeness. Having some kind of relationships is so, so important. The tool I came up with to help you build your relationships, I call it the to-who list. It's simply like a to-do list, but rather than a list of all the stuff you got to do, it's a list of the people you want to stay in contact with, relationships you want to build, maintain, and sustain. And you just pull out your to-who list. So I just had Dave here visiting a couple of days ago. Dave is a friend from 50 years ago when I was in college. Yeah, I'm an old dude. And Dave and I have seen each other maybe just a handful of times, but each time I see him, it's like we saw each other yesterday. Dave is definitely on my to-who list to make sure I stay in touch with him. I reach out and contact, even if I can't see him. We can Zoom, we can talk, we can text, we can WhatsApp. Who are those people that would go on your to-who list, or in my language, who will you to-who today? Because the more you can build and sustain deeper relationships, but also, again, those more casual things. Hey, maybe I'm going to consciously go out and when I walk my dog today, I'm going to just make eye contact and just say hello to whoever I pass. Very, very important. The book, they just wrote a book, the people who are Waldinger is the current study, head of the study, and he and his colleague, Mark Schultz, just wrote a book called The Good Life that summarizes, in layman's terms, what they've learned from that study. So that's one of the books that's on my resource list. I read it, it's good. Okay, let's go to summary now. How to increase happiness and well-being. I know I've covered a lot, but what I want to do is just kind of give you a flavor and give you a taste, hopefully spark your interest so you'll go out and look into this stuff some more. So we've talked about how to increase happiness and well-being. We talked about principles and practices. I hope you've gotten the message from me today that no matter how difficult your life is, because none of this is Pollyanna, none of this is to say there's not pain and suffering in life. There is. But no matter what you've got going on, I want you to know, at least I believe deeply in the bottom of my heart, happiness is not out of reach. The chance to be happier in this moment, right here, right now, it's waiting to be discovered. I've given you 7 things that you can try. We've talked about savoring those small moments. We've talked about doing the 3 good things exercise once a day for a week. We've talked about experiencing awe. What are the things that create awe for you, and making sure you include those in your daily life. We've talked about maybe you want to look into a mindfulness meditation practice, learning more about mindfulness, learning more about meditation. Maybe that's something you're going to take away from today. We've talked about the power of gratitude. We talked about the power of practicing compassion. And we finished up talking about how important it is to nurture the relationships in our life. Not all of those things are going to work for you. Matter of fact, some of my tips for you on how to take this stuff and apply it is, don't try to do all that stuff at once. Maybe just pick one of them, and say, you know what, I'm going to pick one of those 7 things Gary gave me, and I'm going to try it for a week, whatever it might be. Or just experiment, find out what works for you. Maybe none of those 7 things work for you, but through your research, looking into this further, you find some other sorts of things that do work for you. This is not a game of perfect, so please be patient with yourself. We're not trying to become happier like that. It doesn't work that way. And you're not going to be happy all the time. But to increase the happier moments in your life is something that is within our control. But be patient if you're not feeling happier right away. It's not a game of perfect. Matter of fact, there's that mindset of it's all or nothing, all or nothing. I'm all in. I'm going to go get happier. I say, nah, just do all or something. Just do a little bit of something today. I try to meditate for at least 5 or 10 minutes a day. And I've been doing that now for almost a year straight. And I've noticed it's making a difference. I just do a little something. I'm not a heavy duty meditator, but that little piece right there. And I go out on my walks, even when I don't feel like it. Hey, I know it's going to help me feel better. And finally, be a courageous optimist. It's a mindset that I call courageous optimism. My mom again. Courageous optimists tell themselves the truth about their situation. So if life is tough, it's tough. And my mom had this problem with her legs. Doctors told her in her head. She goes, no, it's not. Choose to believe the future can be better. I know you're already doing that one. Otherwise, you wouldn't be watching this webinar. You know, you got a hope that things can be better. And 3, though, you got to do something. You got to act. Mom kept working until she found some other doctors, and because of her work and many, many others, we have this foundation and Carla and people here today trying to help us. I've got a list of resources. I'm not going to run through it. This is not an endorsement of anybody or anything. These are just some things that I have found, that I have used, that have helped me. The very last one, they have the app Calm. I haven't actually used that one, but a lot of my clients have said they like it. This will be, when you go back and watch the webinar, you can snap a picture of it right now, but that'll be there for you. So getting happier right now is a choice. And why not take that first step right now? So Carla, I am ready to take some of the questions. Thank you all for paying attention.
All right, first one, how does someone maintain happiness when their world seems to be coming down all around them?
Yeah, that's when life can seem really, really overwhelming. I've had many, many moments at that time. And what I've learned on that one, it's important to be willing to ask for help if you need it. It may seem like the world is coming down, but if you can find others who love you or care for you, or a professional, I've gone to professional counselors. I'm a professional psychologist, but there's times in my life when I'm overwhelmed. I can't help myself. I got to go to maybe a counselor that can help me, go to a friend that might help me. So you reach out to others who care about you, get the help that you need that would be helpful for you. Also, no matter how difficult things are, remember my dad, we thought he might be dying. He's in the ER. That was bad, but we found a moment of happiness right there. So there's 1,000,001 things I could say about that, but don't be afraid to ask for the help that you need.
All right, how do you find happiness when pain and other disabilities render you not only useless, but a burden to others?
That one touches my heart. Number one, you're making some assumptions there. You're making assumptions that you're a burden to others. You think about the people that you love in your life, and if they're really struggling, do you go, oh, what a burden they are? Or do you go, oh man, I feel for them. I want to do something for them. There's got to be people in your life who feel the same way about you. Yeah, sometimes helping those people is not the most fun thing to do, but when you care and love about somebody, so there's people who care and love about you, I'm going to take that guess. And you also make an assumption that you're useless. I want you to look up a guy by the name of Dick Woodward. Dick, Woodward. Dick was a pastor. Can't tell you his whole story, but he wanted to make a difference in the world. He got a horrible neurodegenerative disease where he was paralyzed from the neck down. He literally couldn't do anything. And it was when he was in that state that he made his biggest impact on the world. Hundreds of churches got founded because of Dick's work when Dick physically could no longer do anything. So challenge your assumptions there. Again, seek some help if you think it would be helpful for you.
Okay, I'm trying to overcome depression associated with RLS. How much does a lack of sleep affect depression?
Interesting. One of the short-term treatments for depression is sleep deprivation. It's really weird. We're not quite sure why, but sometimes I suffer from depression. And sometimes if I get, a really bad night of sleep or because of whatever, I only got a couple nights, couple hours, I actually feel better the next day. However, over time, sleep deprivation is not good for depression over time. So yeah, that is something that, again, that's why with those of us who have, live with RLS, at times we will, the depression, the lack of sleep from the RLS can increase that. So you just want to do everything that you can to learn to reduce that stress, learn better sleep habits. It's not always going to work great, but do whatever you can to improve your sleep. Because yeah, without adequate sleep, it's not good for us. And so we need to learn whatever we can about. Maybe that'd be something we could do, Carla, one time. You guys could do a webinar on just how do you sleep with RLS? What are some of the best tips and techniques if we haven't done that already?
Great idea. When you don't feel well because of meds or a breakthrough, how does one do joyful things when you feel overwhelmed?
Again, it's looking in those micro moments. It's looking when, let me share something like, talk about being overwhelmed. Our first child had horrible medical problems. And when he was 4 months old, he weighed 7 pounds and he had to have open heart surgery. And he's on the gurney and the elevator's door shut. And I think to myself, he's going in for open heart surgery. I may never see him again. One of the worst moments in my life. Now I had a choice. What did I want to do next? Well, he's going to be in the surgery for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. I could go sit in a room and just drive myself nuts. It was a beautiful day. I went to my wife and said, honey, you want to take a walk? And we took a walk. And life can be overwhelming. But again, this is where meditation can help too, because life is tough enough as it is, but then we tend to pile on by all the mental add-ons. I call them mental add-ons, where we're just, let's say I'm experiencing RLS at night and I can go, I can't sleep. This is overwhelming. I got to get up early in the morning. And then my mind starts going, I'm going to get up early. I'm not going to sleep at all. None of that's helpful. None of that is helpful. The RLS is what it is. How do I choose to think about it? What do I choose to do about it? Those are things I can learn. Those are things under my control that I can do to try to find a slice of happiness or find something that will help me cope. It's having and keeping that hope, believing the future can be better, taking something from my webinar, take something from the other webinars, and keep on going. We can't control what happens to us in life, but we always get to choose how we want to respond.
Okay, here's another one. How do I accept growing old? I look in the mirror and don't recognize myself anymore. It's very depressing.
Yeah, it is. I'm right there with you. I look in the mirror and go, whoa, what in the world is that? But you know what? I learned this from my mom. Because my mom, I love my mom, and she did some fantastic stuff for RLS. But she would always be like, "Oh, I'm so old," and and then she would look at a picture of herself from like, "Look at that! Look how young I looked." And so, like when she was 77, she looked at a picture of herself when she was 67. Look how young I looked back then. Well, I remember I was around when she was 67, and she was saying how old she looked when she was 67. And when she looked at a picture of herself when she was 57, she said, look how, and it was the same thing. She got to be 87. Mom, we got her until she was almost 91. About 87, she was talking about how young she looked at 77. So that was a great perspective for me. I can't change the fact I'm going to get older. I know my mind is probably going to exaggerate how old I look, but this is how old I am. And I know when I look 10 years from now, God lets me live another 10 years, I'm going to look back and go, wow, I look pretty good. So I might as well say, hey, I look pretty good right now. How about that?
There you go. How do I keep from feeling angry when I'm awoken multiple times a night?
You can't keep from feeling your feelings sometimes, but it's what you choose to do with them. Do you want anger to drive your behavior, or do you want, this is where mindfulness meditation is very helpful for those negative emotions. The emotions will come up. And without awareness, without being mindful, we tend to get swept up by it. And again, the anger might just fuel more anger and more anger and more anger. When we learn to meditate, when we learn to be mindful, we notice, oh, I'm really mad right now. And my anger is telling me to go punch the wall. But you know what? I don't think I'm going to go punch the wall. I can feel that anger. And it's interesting, once we notice an emotion, and it's like watching the clouds in the sky, they pass on by. You know, Carla, I was talking to Carla earlier, and Carla, hey, Clara, hey, it's raining today. You know, those clouds are, but if you just watch the clouds eventually pass on by, your emotions like anger will gradually pass on by. So it's learning to experience the emotion, but getting some emotional regulation so that you choose how you want to respond to that emotion. You control the anger. What you do in response to the anger, you don't let the anger determine what your response is going to be. It takes a long time to learn that kind of stuff, but you can learn it.
Okay, our last question is, how do you maintain happiness in the evening when your legs are feeling so odd and you're trying to just relax and watch TV?
Yeah, it's sort of the same sort of thing. Well, there they go again. There go my legs again. I got a choice. I'm going to either just focus on that and be totally consumed by that and bemoan my bad luck or whatever, or I'm going to, you know, some of the techniques, hopefully I learned from Gary, or some of the techniques I've learned by something else. I am going to say, what can I do right now that will maximize my chance to find some peace and happiness and calm? Maybe rather than focusing on my legs, I'm going to pick up the phone and talk to a friend that I know who just lost their loved one. I'm going to focus on somebody else's problems and take my mind off of my own. It's don't give in, and don't pile on. Life is hard enough as it is. And again, I make it sound like it's easy. It's not. It takes a lifetime sometimes to learn this stuff. But as you're learning, you're getting better and better and better. I try to practice what I preach. Those are the kinds of things that I do when I have the kind of experience you just asked about.
Well, this has been very helpful, and I just want to remind everyone, if you want to watch this again, we'll have it up in the member portal and we will get that out to you, because I think this is just really good information for all of us who have, you know, and our family members who also, it's a family experience when you have RLS, just like any other disease. So I encourage you to do that. I also want to remind everyone about the RLS Virtual Summit on April 6th. So if you go onto the website, you can register. We'd love to have you join us for the day with leading RLS researchers and learn what's going on in RLS. But again, thank you, Dr. Brott, for presenting today. This was very informative and helpful, and I think it's going to touch a lot of people.
Thank you all very much, Carla. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you all for participating. And remember, it's a journey. Pick one thing, take that first step, and get going.
All right. Well, thank you again. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye-bye.